Windows wide, the curtains fly to catch the evening breeze. Without you here to keep me warm, believe I'd rather freeze. Believe I'd rather freeze. And how long can we walk that line between the sea and sand? How long can we bide our time for dreams we never planned? For dreams we never planned. When the sky said the winter time is coming on, and you cry to see a shadow, babe, it's growing long across the lawn, another song. Tuesday night, it's 3 a.m. I ought to be asleep. If only I could tell you all about the dreams I keep. Oh, about the dreams I keep. I wake up every morning and I'm wasted all the day. I'd turn it all around if I could only hear you say that you were here to stay. When the sky said the winter time is coming on, and you cry to see a shadow, babe, it's growing long across the lawn, another song. Sometimes in my silence, before the city glow, I still recall the nights when I could hear you breathing low, and I caught you breathing low. But it's too late to turn around, too cold to go outside. I wonder if I saw this love as anything beside another place to hide. When the sky said the winter time is coming on, and you cry to see a shadow, babe, it's growing long across the lawn, another song.
Can you hear me all right? This Chula here is a really good mule. And that's all you can say. She's just a really good mule. I've roped off her and tied cattle down. You've probably seen that in the video. But and I just wanted to tell you that little interesting fact, The Outer Coast is the book that my friend Glenn sent me, and I finished it up finally. And in 1840, there was a guy named Beckworth and another guy named Pegleg Smith. Pegleg got his name because they had him amputate his leg because it got rotten. And he was pretty famous mountain man. But these guys, the mountain men, they run out of trapping, they run out of guiding. And so it come down to the horse trading. Anyway, a man named Beckworth and Pegleg Smith, they decided to bring, they acted like they were scouting the country for beaver, but the fact is they were checking the country out for a route to steal horses. So they got a band of natives, and as it turns out, I'm always curious which tribe it was, and it turns out it was the Utes. So they got these Ute Indians to come with them, and they come out to California and stole about 1,000 head of horses. Now you got to know that 1840 was after they seceded from Spain, so it was Baja under Mexican rule, and it was before the gold rush, so it still wasn't a whole lot of people here. But they knew that all the ranchos had a lot of horses. So they come out, they crossed the Green River. That was the crossing for the Colorado River back then. Then they came out and they made a raid, and they went from San Luis Obispo to San Bernardino. San Bernardino being the last stop. And then they hid them in a canyon up by the Cajon Pass. And anybody that's drove from LA to Las Vegas went right through the Cajon Pass. And if you're coming from LA, if you look to the right just before you start up the hill, there's the actual Cajon, which means box. It's a box canyon that they went through. And there's a historical marker there. I mean, that's where it happened. And if you look to the left, it looks to me like that would have been the perfect canyon to hide them in, because they had water up there where the train runs down below. You guys from LA will know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they headed out across the desert, and then Camarillo and his buddies got in hot pursuit. They were going to catch them. So they put the run on them. And by putting the run on them, it made the horse thieves hurry, and they lost about half the horses from exhaustion out there between LA and Barstow. And what the point was that by the time they actually got back to Santa Fe to do their trading, they didn't have as many horses as they started with, so that wasn't a real money-making proposition. So it kind of ended the era of the big horse drives to Santa Fe. But the ironic part for me is some of those horses that were stolen in California ended up in St. Louis, horses and mules, and then they ended up coming right back out with the settlers, and they made the full circle all the way back to California. So that's the interesting part. But anyway, that's another page in the history of California. That's where all the good horses were, so that's where they stole them. And the mountain men just ended up guiding a bunch of pilgrims out in covered wagons. But I guess you know I'm a historian, and when you connect the dots, you don't hear about the Ute very often. Well, the Ute were very smart people and had some really nice country. And of course, like everybody else, it was taken from them. And I read a story one time of some Ute warriors went up to a rancher and went to his house. And this rancher who had taken the land and put together an outfit, they went up to his door, and the rancher came out and they said, "We want food." And he's like, "What the hell? Why should I give you food? You're just begging." And they said, "No." And what they explained to him is that you took our hunting ground. You didn't ask. If you'd asked us for food, we would have given you food, but you took our land. Now we don't have a hunting ground. So you owe us food. And they were right. But of course the white man, he thought they were just a bunch of guys bumming groceries. So that's another dot that I always like to connect. And anyway, the idea of the takeover, if you read about the Utes, you'll read another really cool piece of history. Well, she's close to it. The San Juan, the Four Corners area is the big picture of the Utes. You know, they all kind of had the same country. You got the Hopi, Zuni, Navajo, Ute. The Utes are mainly north of Four Corners, the way I get it. But Chief Ouray was one of those statesmen. He was really smart. I wanted to tell you this last week, the outfit I'm day working for, we preg tested, and I'd never been around this, but the boss decided to bleed him instead of palpating him because he was not happy with the results from the vets. So we bled him. Then our friends Jeremy and Brandy come over and helped, and then he went home and his wife and him sat in the living room and run a pregnancy test on the blood, so they took care of it. And that was pretty interesting to me that he's proactive enough to be smart enough to figure out another way of preg testing. And the good news for me was we got to gather twice because I go down there to work all my horses, and then we cut the dries out. So that was a new deal for me. But Mike, the boss, he's a low stress livestock believer, and that's why it's a real pleasure working for him, because there's no yelling, ki-yi, yippee, none of that stuff. And you walk everything in. And my friend, my partner Enrique, you've heard me talk about him before, his dad told him and whoever was working for him, when they gathered, if the cattle come in, it looked like guacamole all over the back end of them, it means they ran them too fast. And that's kind of the that's the line, I guess you could call it. So that ours didn't have any on the back end, they just walked in. And then when they're in the corral, you handle them very quietly and there's no yelling. Once again, we ran them, and he did something else that I haven't done since I was messing with a band of sheep. And when we got the cattle in, we ran them through the chute, opened all the gates on the alley, and there was no people at the head gate, and we just ran the whole bunch through the chute the day before. And then we dropped them in a trap for the night and then gathered them back in the morning. And the point was like sheep, you run a band through the race, then you bring them back, and then you start bringing them back and dodging them and vaccinating and all that, and it makes them go a lot smoother through the gate. So it worked really well with the cattle also. And then when it came to the calves, we were bringing them enough to fit in the alley, but just sitting there and letting them kind of sort out which way to go. And it was amazing to watch, if you just be quiet and give them a chance, how they would walk down. There was no hot shots, no them plastic things with the rocks in them. None of that. Didn't need it. And here's the hook, the thing that makes me laugh, is that a whole lot of ranchers will say, well, that's fine, but we don't have time for that. Well, make time. All right, there's Chula.
Do you want to explain why we're doing this video for Chula? Chula's going to go live with our friend Bev.
Chula's headed for New Mexico. Our friend Bev got her, and she's going to use her up there at about 8,000 feet. And Bev's already got mules, had them for 20 years. And so we're real happy that she's going there. And we just wanted to give Bev the video of where she's at with her. So this has been a chapter for Deb to get her confidence up about heights. Well, two things happened. You can tell by the height of the mule that she kind of got over that. And then the mule, of course, took care of her in the mountains. So that's why we had Chula. Now it's time for her to move on. So thank you.
Another song